There's times I wonder, how many and what kind of drugs were these people on when they wrote this game's script? And I knew that this wasn't made by David Cage's studio, but I still looked it up to see if he had some kind of hand in it, as after 30 minutes of playing it, and all the information dump they give, I still had no idea what was going on. As a forewarning, I'm not too happy with this review, mostly because I feel overly critical of a game that's genuinely trying to be something really good. But there's flaws that stick out like a sore thumb to me. Like, really stick out. I imagine that the pitch meeting for this was a bunch of backpatting about the success of Alan Wake, which I only heard mentioned once, and that was when it was in development, and not again until it was being pulled from digital stores for a music licensing issue. And that's when it seemed to have that cult following. And then there was Quantum Break, which I didn't hear positive things about, but yet the critical reception is really up there, so I don't know. This is the first game that I've played by Remedy Entertainment, so I could not be going into this more blind than I already am. Graphically, the game is very impressive. It makes use of Nvidia's new ray tracing technology, which, to be really honest here, it looks fantastic. I mean, the reflections, the lighting, and the shadows, they look real. Courtney Hope plays the main character, Jessie, and she does not look good at all. I'm sorry to say that. Her character model is terrible. She looks more like RuPaul playing Courtney Hope. The facial animations range from being really good and realistic to almost robotic or alien-like that's trying to emote like a human being, and doing it way too hard so that it enters that uncanny valley territory. And Jesse's running animation kinda looks off to me. Almost like that glitched Mass Effect Andromeda run that looks like the character was crapping their pants as they were running, but it's not as goofy. And hand animations and cutscenes are also sort of robotic, but I expect that, and longtime viewers will know that is one thing I will critique a lot when it comes to these hyper-realistic looking games, is hand animation. There are scenes where the camera will zoom in on Jessie's eyes when she's talking to someone so you can hear her inner monologue, and I wish that they didn't do this, because her eyes look so plastic looking, and these scenes are also really annoying. When she's talking to whoever it is she's talking to, you think that it's you, but it's not, it's some otherworldly force that's talking to her. The sound is okay, it feels heavily inspired for movies like Inception, where it's that thriller type of music that would do these big and loud bass thumps. Some of it sounds like Doom 2016. It works pretty well and helps with the atmosphere, giving you that otherworldly feeling that the game is trying to set up, and the atmosphere is really cool, and the building that you're in does feel alive, like literally alive, which I think that's what they were going for, and I think they nailed that. Control is a third-person shooter, and controls very much like your typical third-person shooter, of which I would say Resident Evil 4, Uncharted, or Gears of War sort of set that standard for that genre. Pick your choice in that regard. Left trigger aims, right trigger shoots, A jumps, X uses melee attacks, and you can use telekinetic powers to lift objects and throw them. The entire game takes place inside the Federal Bureau of Control, also called the Oldest House, or for the purposes of this review, the FBC. It's Metroidvania in how it's styled, with backtracking to earlier areas to get things that you need to advance to other areas. It's a pretty non-linear game and gives you a sense of realism to the building as you travel back and forth between departments. I've heard people criticize the map, but I've never had an issue with it, probably because I was also using the signs that are posted all over the place that tell you where each area is located. There's an AI system called the Encounter Director that changes encounters based on skill level. I noticed this a few times with the game's first boss, and I don't think all the bugs have been worked out of it. For this boss, you get the ability to pick up and throw objects. When I got that ability, a swarm of enemies came in, and it was actually a difficult encounter. More difficult than anything I had encountered previously. but I overcame it, and video game logic would tell you that this new ability is how you would defeat the boss, because he does the same thing, and it was something you just acquired. But you just don't fight him. He sends in backup for you to take care of. The first time I tried this, the boss dodged every single object I threw at him, and enemies with shields came in as well. The second time, only one shielded enemy came in. Third time, no shielded enemies came in, and the boss mostly just flew around not doing anything. Fourth time, less enemies showed up and the boss didn't dodge as much. And then I finally downed the boss on the fifth time, as only 2 reinforcements spawned and the boss didn't move around that much, but still dodged all my thrown objects, so I just unloaded the gun into him. It made me wonder if I was that good in the beginning of the game for the boss encounter to be that difficult, because it felt like a very big leap in difficulty. It's just odd in how the game adjusts its difficulty. It seems frustrating that instead of it being a nice steady curve, it's a sine wave. The game just sends in waves and waves of enemies at you, like Uncharted. In fact, its combat and how it works is very much like Uncharted, just with psychic powers. Your psychic powers allow you to dodge and air dash. You can pick up items and throw them with incredible force, sometimes even one-shotting an enemy. Later on, you're able to get a shield and you can fly, and all these psychic powers can be upgraded to make you pretty much unstoppable. The psychic powers are also really well implemented for combat. It's fun to grab items and throw them at enemies, or even pick up weak enemies and throw them. But you'll pretty much encounter the same bunch of bad guys. There's weak ones with pea shooters, the medium ones with normal damaging weapons, then there's strong enemies with heavy weapons that are absolute damage sponges, and they may have powerful weapons, some even being a mini-boss type of enemy where they're large, have massive health bars, and are crazy powerful weapons. Enemies of the medium and up variety can also have energy shields. How you take cover is really dumb. You have to click the right analog stick to crouch, and then you move against something that you want to take cover against. Which is weird, as most games like this, the character will kind of glue themselves to whatever it is that they're using for cover, and they'll move alongside of it. And when you go to aim, they pop up from it, and then when you let go of the trigger, they go back down behind cover. Jesse does not do this, so you'll be clicking that right analog stick each time you pop up from cover to go back down into it. But taking cover and playing defensively is actually a terrible idea. I generally take a methodical approach to games like this. But the best and most effective method is to take the Doom approach. Don't stop moving and alternate between throwing things and shooting. Even if there's nothing to grab, Jesse will rip concrete off of the floor or wall so this way you can throw it. As long as you keep moving, you'll pick up more health than you'll know what to do with, because enemies will always drop health. And when you take the Doom approach, it's fun but not really challenging, because you're fighting with the same 4 or 5 enemies repeatedly in larger and larger waves as the game goes on. And maybe that's why I had such a hard time with the first boss. I was taking a more defensive strategy when I should have just been going balls to the wall crazy. But having the same 4 or 5 enemies come at you in waves, and I mean a lot of waves, that's what made me stop playing Uncharted 3. Because once I killed several dozen to hundreds of dudes, I kind of get taken out of the game because I start going on autopilot, which lets my brain start to overthink. Like, I'm pretty sure I've taken out the entire staff of this company by now, so why are there still people coming after me? And eventually, I just got bored with that and stopped playing after, I think, 5 hours. There's some RPG elements to the game. You get skill points that you can put into talent trees, like having more health, doing more damage with throwing stuff, but getting those skill points isn't really explained, because you don't level up like you would in a game like Tomb Raider, where you get a skill point upon leveling up. You get them at certain critical points of the story, and because of how long it takes for the game to give you those skill points, it feels slow in how powerful you become. Getting weapon or personal mod slots takes a long time because it's dependent on how many resources you have or how many skill points you've invested. The leveling system just doesn't feel balanced, is what I'm saying. Sometimes it feels like the game is being really stingy with it, making the game harder, but then it's overly generous, making you overpowered. and enemies will drop a lot of mods for you to pick up, which you can dismantle for resources, but for a very minimal amount. But you do get a lot of resources from defeating enemies. And these resources can be used for the game's crafting system, which kinda feels like the Tomb Raider Reboot's crafting system. The game will also pop up with rescue missions that give you 20 minutes to do so. All you do is go to an area, shoot up a bunch of guys until you complete the objective, and that's it. After the second time, I looked to see if I was rewarded with something, as I didn't notice the first time, and I wasn't rewarded the second time, or if I was, the game didn't say anything. So when these rescue missions kept popping up, and they will, I just began to ignore them. The sad thing is, while it feels like a standard third-person shooter for the most part, it's missing a good story. Because the story feels like it expects you to know exactly what happened prior to the events of the game. Why Jessie has these powers and who sent her to the FBC, and why she is the new director. Yeah, the second you get there, you're the new director. It just feels so pretentious, like a David Cage game, where it's trying to insult your intelligence by coming off as really deep, profound, and philosophical, when it's really just so poorly delivered that you have the audience confused and your driving force for the game just shot itself in the foot. If we look at the games that this is trying to emulate, like Uncharted or the Tomb Raider Reboot series, the story is the driving force of the game, pushing you forward. Something is on the line, and the main character is likable, and their relationship with the other characters are not only believable, but can be entertaining as well. Jessie has no relationship with any character, and doesn't even build ones with a character like Emily, who for the first few interactions with her, I don't care about her at all. Without a good story or likable characters, what's the driving force to keep playing? Why would I want to see Jessie rescue her brother who was taken by the FBC? And I know there's people out there who will say, who cares about the story? All that matters is the gameplay. Story has become such a driving force in video games now that it does matter as much as gameplay, because it can mask monotonous gameplay and help push you along to see what happens next. Additionally, and this is not a bad thing, most third-person shooters are, at their core, all the same. Sure, there's some slight differences. Uncharted is more like Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider is more like Metal Gear Solid, but their core functionality is the same. You're playing the games for their story, not their gameplay. If you were just playing it for their gameplay, why would you ever buy the sequels or other games of the genre, as fundamentally, they are the same? And Jessie is such a block of wood that it makes me wonder if she cares about finding her brother at all. Even after she becomes the new director right in the beginning of the game and is accepted as the new director, which happens immediately, and I mean 5 minutes into the game, and no one opposes her as the new director, she's still very secretive about why she's there. She has psychic powers and no one is questioning your authority. Just ask about your brother and let's get this over with. But with Jessie being secretive in the story, it just feels like a roadblock to keep going. And the thing is, the stuff in the FBC seems more interesting. There's a jukebox that's locked inside of a glass box. There's a rubber duck in a room that's the center of a table. The Oceanside Motel and Casino that's used for some puzzle solving. And these X-Files things are way more interesting than the story that I'm slogging through. And these things are things that you can actually, in fact, interact with if you put in the effort to do so, and they could lead to some optional side bosses. And if you're just going through the main story of the game, and with how weird it is, and its pacing, it can make you not care, as you'll be fighting the same 4 or 5 enemies repeatedly as you make your way through the story. And that more interesting stuff are epic boss battles that are actually side missions. Like there's this one with a refrigerator that turns into a giant monster. I don't know, I didn't get to that part, but I saw some clips of it, and it looks really cool. And the thing is, you really do need to explore on your own and do more stuff on your own. You really do need to check every single nook and cranny. Otherwise, you're going to be missing out on a lot of cool stuff. And you need to read the reports and listen to the hotline stuff and watch the videos that are in the game. You really need to do so much if you really want to get your value out of this game. Because this game's driving force, this story, does not lead you down those paths. And it does not encourage you to go off on your own and look at this stuff. And it needs to do that. Not for every single one, mind you, but there should be some main story stuff that says, hey, this thing is weird, go look at it, and then bring you back to the main story. It doesn't have to do it for every single one, but it does need to encourage you to go looking for others on your own. And the game just does not do that. Instead, the game kind of forces you down this really bland and boring, overly convoluted story, which just made me stop playing it, unfortunately. On a personal level, I don't like this game in a way that a lot of other people do. It's just meh for me. There's just design and presentation choices that rub me the wrong way. But objectively, it's good, and I can see why people like it. I think I just looked too much into the hype and ended up being disappointed in the end. And maybe I might not be the demographic for this game. I would assume that if you were a massive X-Files fan, then this game would be for you.